Our next Reddit post is from Radioactive Sex Doll. The TLDR is at the bottom for those who just want to go for it. The explanation of what happens and how effective this is in the lengthy post below. I've kind of kept this little gem quiet for a while because it's such a great way to make sure you achieve that fuck you and have the last say. Kind of literally actually, and I don't know how long it will continue to work if too many people really catch on to it. But, I figure I might as well share the love for everyone to enjoy before it's too late. Smile. This will basically render someone's email address/inbox unusable. It is effective on any email address, even Gmail addresses. For the life of me, I don't know how, because Gmail has some of the best automated spam filtering in existence, and even this does not seem at all to significantly affect, let alone stop it. I even set up a special Gmail test account to see what it did to a fresh, unused Gmail account, and well, within a few weeks the account was filled with thousands and thousands of messages. If this was put onto someone's more permanent business account, e.g. an account that someone uses from a private domain name, especially one that is critical and has been printed on their marketing/promotion/business card/etc. I could imagine it would be a real pain in the arse to fix. Even for personal email accounts, it could be devastating. Good luck changing email addresses for all those little accounts, things they sign up for every day and forget about, until one day later down the track they for some reason need to sign into whatever it was, if it is still associated to the spammed account, to confirm the login credentials and find they have 300,000 pages of spam to trawl through, or more than likely the email account has started bouncing all emails due to being over its limit quota. Good luck unsubscribing to the mailouts, they don't pay attention to that it seems. Good luck with the rest of the affiliate sites they also sign you up to, even if one were to finally track these fuckers down and work out how to log in and change their subscription preferences, which they don't pay any attention to either. Once you're on, they have signed you up with hundreds of third-party mail-out lists in their affiliate network which you would have to track down and sort individually. Good luck calling them, if you manage to track down their shady contact details and a phone number. It is possible, but it takes some thinking outside the box to work out how, because most people won't even work out where the source of all the spam is coming from. It doesn't list the actual spam sender on the spam emails, only the organization they are sent on behalf of, and of course the actual groups you are getting spammed by have no contact details, either. Trust me, I spent weeks trying to sort this out myself, and despite being fairly tech savvy, I ended up cutting my losses and walking away. So, you get my point, this thing works. I found out about this the hard way, because someone I know signed me up to it and I have since had to change my email address. Not before I spent weeks and weeks trying to filter it, beat it, or find a way around it. I even called the organization that hosts this spam platform, multiple times. Who are overseas? Yes, I was calling overseas on the other side of the world during their business hours, which is the middle of the night my time. After a week and 4 or 5 attempts at a peaceful resolution, trying to escalate the issue and trying to get somewhere but not, I lost my shit and just yelled abuse down the phone at the person who answered in frustration, kicked the cat, and decided I was just going to have to start fresh and walk away from the email address. TL/DR. Simply Google Salem Web Network and go to the homepage, then down the bottom there is a link for preferences.salemwebnetwork http://preferences.salemwebnetwork.com/ and there you will see a sign up page. Simply enter the email address of that special jerk of the moment in your life, enter a password of your choice, and then start selecting the available mailing lists. It does not send them a subscribe confirmation. These guys are all about the numbers obviously, and they don't care where they come from. So again, once you subscribe, there is no turning back. Anyway, after signing them on to the initial 20 or so checkbox options, click confirm and then you will see a link to other preferences or something like that. It will then bring up a page with a heap of other possible mailing lists you can select to, maybe 50 or so from memory. Add them all. Then update preferences. Then you will find a further link that will bring up their entire network of Christian and Bible-related organizations. Click through each one and select all checkboxes on each of the lists. Some only have 5 to 10 mailing lists, some have hundreds. All up there must be 400 or so individual mailing lists, and each of those lists can send 1 to 10 emails out per day. It's spammy as fuck and I have no idea how they have not been blacklisted completely, but until they are, we might as well use the evil for good. Now, signing them up to all of these lists can take hours as there are literally hundreds of lists under each organization, and although it's easy as clicking the checkboxes, there are so many it takes time. But it's worth it because each one of them can send your jerk friend a spam email up to 6 times a day. So you potentially can receive tens of thousands of emails every single day from hundreds of different mailing lists. I got a Chrome extension that allows me to bulk select so I can sign them all up to as many lists as possible in the shortest possible time. Enjoy! Our next Reddit post is from Hero N. So back when I was in grade 6 I was a nervous and anxious kid, and so I never took photographs or really wanted to be in anyone else's photos, and that's what caused a lot of this. So near the end of elementary, my gym teacher was organizing the graduation for all the grade 6 children moving into junior high school, and one thing he asked of all children was baby pictures, or at least a picture of when I was younger. Now, me not liking pictures, I really didn't have anything for this event, and I even asked my parents and they didn't really have anything either, so we submitted a picture that was 1 to 2 years older and told it was too recent. So instead of just using that photo, he replaced my photo with this horrible photo of a hairless chihuahua and publicly embarrassed me in front of my school. I of course ran out of the gym crying. Here is where I took revenge. 1. I demanded an apology and my parents contacted the school board. 2. Even after he gave a half-assed apology, I told him it wasn't sincere and I would go to the school for an apology. 3. I demanded that action be taken so he would never do this to someone else. All in all, he lost his tenure, was embarrassed due to his actions, and I learnt later on he lost his job for similar actions after embarrassing someone else. In general, I felt like I went a little far, but I think it was well deserved. Edit. Wow, this is literally the first time a post of mine got double-digit upvotes, let alone triple-digit, so thank you to all you very kind people. And as someone in the comments mentioned, I did not demand the apology directly from the teacher. I was far too afraid of that, but I did tell my parents I was not satisfied with the apology he gave, which led to me getting a more sincere apology. Hopefully that clears that up. Edit 2. Wow, thank you for the medals and upvotes. It's insane to read the comments and see so many similar experiences. Thank you to everyone who has read this post, and to those who have commented their own experiences. I wish you all the best, and once again thank you. Our next Reddit post is from Smoke Ward. I'm watching my neighbor's house / feeding their cats for a couple days while they're out of town. For the last couple mornings I've seen a chihuahua, with no collar, running around loose. This morning, that chihuahua shit on my neighbor's lawn. Of course, no person around to be responsible and pick up after their ugly little rat. I shoot it off as it growled and barked at me, and heard somebody calling for it as it ran to a house a few doors away. I used a stick to scoop its shit onto a leaf, then proceeded to fling it across their lawn. I'm considering leaving a note about how if they continue to let their dog out to shit where it wants, the shit will promptly be returned to their doorstep instead of the lawn. For now, I'm extremely satisfied with this petty revenge. Our next Reddit post is from Deadshot Remix. When I was fairly young, my aunt Loken, she had a baby, my cousin, and I was around 7 and my cousin was around 1 to 2 and he could crawl. My aunt, who was trying to get more sleep, said, "Can you watch him?" We was in one room, and I was like, sure, but I was bored and fogo to watch him, and he broke something, I think. And she told me to tell her what he was doing. So I listed everything he did: he crawling, he standing against the bed, he put his dummy in his mouth act. She got annoyed and told me to only say things that could break. Also, I'm on mobile, so excuse my bad grammar act. Our next Reddit post is from PackersFan12CB. Okay, so before school ended I left my textbook up at a friend's house. He decided to take my book. He did it because his book page numbers were cut off. A couple days later he gave me my book back. It took me 2 days to notice because we didn't use our books at all. When I found out, I told him he had to the end of the day. He said he would give it to me Friday. It was Monday. I told him no and to give it to me at the end of the day. Well, the end of the day comes around and I tell him it would be nice to have my book back. Well, I get yelled at for standing when I told him. So being me, I told the teacher and he kept on saying it was his book and said it had his name in it. Well, I get my book back and I showed the teacher where he had written his name. He didn't bother to erase my name and put his in, and the best part, he tried writing my name in his book. What an idiot. Our next Reddit post is from the Broken Puppet 19. The smartass in this post happens to be me. I didn't have a good night's sleep and was working on 3 hours of sleep in a 36-hour period of time. I was in no shape to be dealing with my Karen neighbor. For some reason she's had a problem with my dad and I since the day we moved into the neighborhood. He's disabled and I'm his caretaker. I can understand with my dad, but I live by the motto respect me and I'll respect you. I have done absolutely nothing to this neighbor except say hi once or twice in passing. I've had water poured on me, insults thrown my way, and in the past few months is when the harassment has started. My dad had told me that we're getting some new furniture, so I was given the task of putting the old stuff in the trash corrale. There's no problem with putting small furniture pieces in the corrale, and nobody's raised a fuss over other neighbors putting full-blown dressers, mattresses, and bed frames in there. Tired as hell me just starts bringing out the chairs and putting them in the trash corrale. As I'm walking back to get another chair from my porch, I hear a loud voice. "You're not supposed to put them in there. You call someone to pick those up." I just look at Karen with tired eyes. "Lady, I was just told to put them there." Karen stands up from her chair and glares. "Not by the manager. I'm calling the manager right now." And she goes inside to get her phone. Too tired for conflict, I mumble I seriously don't get paid enough to deal with this, and bring the chairs back to my porch. I message a few friends and talk to them, and a flicker of a light bulb goes through my slow mind. They can't call me out if I take them apart. So I get some tools and spend the next 3 hours taking apart chairs until they are nothing but the wooden planks. I take the planks to the trash, and Karen glares at me with a sour face. The petty revenge was short-lived, as Karen's been recording me and my dad every time we're outside and comments about us negatively. I eventually had to go inside and take my anxiety/PTSD medications from how badly this affected me. My mom sexually abused me and would record me sometimes up until I cut her from my life 2 years ago. I looked back on this interaction and I realized it's not the best petty revenge, but what exactly do you expect from a tired, overworked caretaker? Our next Reddit post is from 2buttholes. "Hey, this is my first time posting anything and I'm on mobile. This happened years ago when I first got my license. I was driving to a friend's house, hadn't even gone 1 block when a big white SUV pulled in front of me. I noticed he was going slow, and thought he would speed up after his turn, but boy was I wrong. He kept it at 10 miles per hour for way longer than necessary. Ike if he was on his phone or looking for an address or what, but I didn't care, it was a 25 zone. I wasn't really in a big hurry, but I was getting annoyed. After about a minute I thought I'd just take another longer route, time didn't matter as long as I got to drive faster. So I make a right and speed along around the block. I wasn't planning on it, but when I got to the stop sign at the intersection I saw the white SUV approaching on my left. Immediately I knew what I had to do, and turned right to get in front of him. As I said, I wasn't in a hurry, and I felt like this guy needed a taste of his own medicine. It felt so satisfying to trudge along at 3 miles per hour on this one-lane road while this big SUV tailgated my tiny Honda Civic. It didn't last too long though, he just turned down a different road when he got the chance. Still makes me smile when I think about it all these years later. Our next Reddit post is from Whitey Mac. I was telling this to someone yesterday and realized it might be enjoyed here. I'm involved in our local and state football, soccer programs. I try to be open and welcoming to everyone, and help and support everyone involved. I've been a referee, coach, adult league player, and admin during this entire time. Most people are great, and into it to advance programs, players, referees and coaches, but there are always those that are prima donnas and jerks, to describe them kindly. Our state has a Hall of Fame, and people submit nominations for proposed candidates, and those nominations take time and energy to prepare and push through. Cue petty revenge. I have nominated many people who are prima donnas and jerks, to again describe them kindly, especially when they have treated me with contempt, for not being up to their level, or disparaged our community programs for their own personal gain. I do this because overall, they probably do deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, and because sooner or later, someone else is going to do it anyway. I do it myself, because they know and have to acknowledge that I nominated them for the Hall of Fame, and whenever anyone congratulates them for being in the HOF, I can smile, and say I nominated them, and they have to be polite and thank me. Was coming up with this year's nominations, and thought I'd pass this petty revenge along. Our next Reddit post is from Diorgi 2007. So basically in Georgia, the country, we got new buses and most of the boomers in the country don't wear masks, so instead of just the bus driver we also have a government workers in there, who basically just approve how we wear masks, so the virus doesn't spread. Oh, and one important thing to note is that the buses here stop at every bus stop in its path. So one day when I was on the bus, an old man comes up with the mask on the mouth area and not on the nose, and the government worker politely tells him to put on his mask over the nose too. He responds, and I quote, "If I should put it over my nose too, then it would have been called a nose mask instead of a face mask, got it?" He gets kicked off the next bus stop. TL, Dr. Old Man doesn't wear a mask properly, gets kicked off the bus. Moral of the story, just wear a mask properly, people. Our next Reddit post is from Akira7N. I used to work at a drugstore, and on this particular day I was having a really bad day. I had to deal with entitled/annoying customers all day, and on top of that, management continuously left me to be the only employee on the floor, so I was literally running back and forth doing 5 things at once. While I was at the register, I heard little pieces of things scatter all over the floor, and when I walked to the left of the register to look down the aisle, I saw a woman, who had her back turned to me, throw a share size, 12-ounce, bag of open Skittles on the shelf and just walk away. I was pissed because I know I would have to clean that up. Anyway, she comes to the counter, not knowing I saw her make that mess, and I proceeded to ring up her groceries. I saw that she had 8 Kinder eggs, chocolate eggs with a hollow center, and as I scanned them and reached down to put them in the bag, I crushed every single one of them and put her juice on top of them to make it seem as if the juice squished them. This made me feel instantly better, and she grabbed her groceries and left. It was nice to get even for once. Now I have no issue cleaning up a mess that a customer made. Plenty of people have accidents and then come and tell me they dropped something or bumped into a display causing things to shatter or spill and then start apologizing. I simply tell them that I will clean it and that it's okay. I also thank them for letting me know, but my issue with this woman is that she made a mess and didn't tell anyone and then continued to shop as if nothing happened. Also, I know people are gonna make excuses like, what if she had crippling anxiety and was afraid to say something? At the end of the day, you look better when you own up to a mistake than to walk away without saying anything. If she said something to me, I would think she had an accident and that's it. When she didn't say anything to me, I thought she was an $8 hole for making a mess and walking out. Our next Reddit post is from Semitnup. I was reading through PettyRevenge stories and realized this story from way back when fits in pretty nicely. Also, this post is going to be a little long, mostly because it deals with a semi-niche topic, Magic the Gathering TCG, so I want to provide people who have zero knowledge of that game with enough clarity to understand what this was all about. This story took place when I was 20. Backstory: in a previous post, https://www.reddit.com/r/roommate//I_was_a__then_someone_saved_me/ I mentioned how my mom sent me up at a special residence to learn how to live on my own because, thanks to my Asperger's, I was having a hard time learning it from my parents. This story took place while I was living there. In this residence, which is actually a pretty sizable townhouse complex where 90% of the units are affiliated with this program, I was introduced to Magic the Gathering, shortened to MTG from here on out, by a couple of different people. The biggest player, and the person who taught me the most, was a guy by the name of Frank. Frank had played MTG since it had come out, had a collection that included all the oldest, rarest, most powerful cards, and had something like 12 different decks at any given time. He went to tournaments and usually did pretty well, even if I don't recall him ever winning anything more than a citywide competition. Equally, Frank was a great tutor. He explained things succinctly and concisely and didn't offer information unnecessarily. Just a great balance of playing and teaching. All that said, Frank had some downright difficult habits and an ego the size of the Titanic. For the vast majority of the time we played together, I built haphazard decks out of crappy cards that I could afford and tried to use them against his top-shelf, steamroll all-comers tournament decks. Needless to say, I lost almost every time. And he always seemed to be a gracious winner. He'd just state that he won, thank me for playing, pick up his cards and shuffle them. I didn't really think he was that bad a guy at this point. Most of my victories against Frank up to this point had been because he'd gotten a bad hand and, even though he played it as well as he could, I just drew better cards, better for the situation, not better overall, at better times and beat him. He was always a little miffed at his deck when that happened, but I always chalked it up to just hating losing because RNGesus screwed you over. He never flew into a murderous rage or directed his anger at me, so I just assumed it was normal. But then my knowledge of the game started expanding and things started to take a turn for the worse. You see, MTG is based, loosely, on a color system. As in, most cards belong to one, or more, colors that define what they do, how they work, and what decks play them. Players can build their decks to use one color, more than one color, all colors or no colors. White, life gain, protective effects like shields, and defense-based things like walls and cities. Blue, control, ways to stop your opponent from playing their deck, drawing more cards from your deck. Green, nature-based, real original I know. Lots of things that work well together like a well-managed ecosystem. Red, fire, destruction, hot-headedness and aggression. Black, corruption, life loss, ambition, sacrificing resources to gain advantages. Frank was a big fan of white, blue, and green. His decks were always based off of different combinations of those three colors, and, though he owned cards in the other two colors, I never once saw him play a deck that had either of those colors in it. His decks were also usually based around playing as few cards early so that later on, when his opponent was starting to run out of steam, he could play out the cards he'd saved and steamroll them. This is commonly referred to as a control deck. This will be important later. Red and black were just not his thing for whatever reasons. Of course, as a new player, I had no such reasons and explored all of the colors intensely. Around this time, I started saving money and buying more powerful cards around which I could build stronger decks. And I started to win. Not all the time, of course. But as my grasp of both the underlying mechanics of the game in general and how his decks worked in specific grew, I started winning games even when he hadn't drawn a bad hand and I hadn't drawn a great one. And the mask finally started to slip. Instead of being miffed at his deck for failing him, Frank started pointing out to whatever card of mine that had sealed his fate and saying things like that card is trash. If only I had drawn, names 4 or 5 cards that were in his deck that he didn't draw that game, I would have totally steamrolled you. Or well, you only won because you drew that card then. If you had drawn it any later, I would have won for sure. I would later come to understand this as being a sore loser, but at the time, I had no real experience with sore losers, so I didn't recognize it for what it was. Unbeknownst to me, as I started beating his decks more and more frequently, he started modifying them to specifically counter the decks I was playing. Instead of building a deck that had a reasonable chance to win any game, Frank had started modifying his decks with cards that were specifically geared at countering and defeating the cards he knew were in my decks. My win rate started to fall, and Frank's graciousness, from back when I used to lose games 99% of the time due to inexperience, was nowhere to be found. Now he was all that's right. Sit down, shut up and F\K off. You can't take me with that weak ass deck. Etc. If I happened to be playing a red or black deck at the time, he was especially vicious. I was completely blown away with how hostile he had turned. It was at this point that one of the other people that had taught me magic and whom I played with took me aside and revealed Frank's subterfuge. I felt betrayed. I had thought the whole point of mentoring someone in a game you play was to eventually see them outclass you or at least become your equal. Now I could finally see what would never have occurred to me when I first sat down to learn the rules. Frank hadn't wanted a student. Not a true one. He wanted someone that he could teach just enough so that they wouldn't bother him during the game, but who would remain easy enough to smash on a regular basis to make themselves feel superior. He didn't want a pupil, he wanted a punching bag. As I processed all this, my revenge started to take shape. I knew Frank wasn't a fan of red and black. And I knew Frank was big time into both green, white and blue, and also control decks. So I studied. I studied hard. I stopped playing MTG for almost a week straight so I could have more time to study, and I took a second week off to shop around for what I would need. And that preparation culminated in me going out and buying the nastiest, fiercest, fastest red and black aggro deck I could afford, which actually turned out to be pretty affordable, since most of the cards were crap on their own, but worked well together. Remember how control decks want to use as few cards as possible and draw the game out until the opponent runs out of steam? The aggro deck is practically the exact opposite. Play cards as fast as possible to try and overwhelm your opponent before whatever their deck does can really get going. It's the spiritual antithesis to his favorite type of deck, and that made it the perfect weapon. After I had all the cards, the other player helped me build the deck and fine-tune it into the best possible deck it could have been with what I had put in it. Now, this deck wasn't going to win tournaments, it was mostly just a cheap, aggro deck built out of objectively subpar cards. But it had synergy, and damn if that synergy didn't turn this ruby-colored piece of coal into a diamond. So I finally come back to the table. Frank is all fake concern and empathy. Missed you last week, buddy. Etc. etc. He's all smiles and banter and has no idea what he's sitting down to. Our first game was practically a tutorial level on how to piss Frank off. From the moment I played my first card, he frowned. And as I played card after card after card, that frown deepened and deepened. The game was over almost before it began, because Frank was used to playing against decks that were a lot more slow and meandering. Suddenly though, he knows the score. Without a word he picks up his deck and switches out to the next one. Second game and he's still in the control mindset. This deck is specifically designed around stopping red and black cards, but he's miscalculated. All the best cards that he could use to smash my deck to a standstill require time and effort to set up. My deck's too fast for them and pulverizes his early defenses easily. At this point he's scowling. Cards go back into the bag and he brings out his third deck. I recognize this third deck. This is the deck he's used to get as far as semifinals of professional competitive play. It's filled to the brim with single cards that cost more than my entire deck put together, and it's easily the most ruthless weapon in his arsenal. Even worse, unlike most of the rest of his decks, this one is also an aggro deck. I barely ever got to play against it because he didn't want to embarrass me by beating me too quickly. There's no hesitation now. That deck is out, shuffled, offered to cut, which I do. Unbeknownst to Frank though, I had some firepower of my own. Part of the rules of MTG include for something called the sideboard, basically a small set of cards that can be substituted into or out of your deck between games, on a 1-to-1 ratio, that allow you to partially customize your deck so it's a bit better against specific matchups. And for anyone who's saying, but wait, if that's in the rules, why did you feel betrayed by Frank doing it to you earlier? Let me explain. Frank wasn't just subbing in a few cards. He was breaking down and rebuilding his entire decks from the ground up, replacing clearly better cards with obviously worse cards because those obviously worse cards specifically countered my deck. This wasn't sub a few cards, it was restructure the entire deck to transform it from deck that does X really well to deck that stops your deck really well. Frank's so busy with shuffling his cards that he doesn't even notice that I'm sideboarding. Game 3. Frank is really confident and it shows. Now he's matching me, fast move for fast move. His cards happen to be better than mine, so for the most part I'm the one being overwhelmed. Then I draw one of my sideboarded cards. I smile. I lay it down. Frank looks over at it. Picks it up. Reads it. Reads it again. Then he throws the card down and shouts, "That wasn't in your deck before. You cheated." And I just give him this real innocent look and say, "But, I thought sideboarding was allowed." "I'm sure you explained sideboarding to me, Frank. Didn't you, Frank?" Frank's steaming now. "You can't beat me with that card. I won't allow it." Now my tone turns icy. "You won't allow it? Can you stop that card from being played?" Frank's not answering. He's looking over the cards in his hand, the cards that he's played, the cards I've played, everything in both of our discard piles to try and find something that he can use to stop this card. Finally, with a roar of anguish, he flips the table. Cards go everywhere. He gets right up in my face and screams, "Red and black aren't real colors anyway. Don't ever play me with that BS deck again." And he storms off. I start cleaning up my cards. Frank and I never did play again. And no one else who used to play with him, in the townhouse complex, ever did either because they didn't want to risk him flipping the table on them. Edit. So I've already seen enough comments from people who know MTG that want to know what the deck was and what the card was. My deck was based around cheap creatures that all either had sacrifice stuff to make mana effects or do something when this creature dies effects. Most of the time, the deck would just win by aggroing the opponent as fast as possible. But it had a backup plan. If I was the one getting overwhelmed by another deck, I could sacrifice a bunch of creatures to generate a one-time burst of mana to play a late-game bomb. The bomb in question? Plague Wind. It wasn't the only bomb, but it was the one I drew. Frank knew that, with what I had left on the table, I could burn through his life before he got back on his feet, so rather than face the humiliation, he lost his shit and flipped the Thank you so much for watching these tales from Reddit. Consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video if you enjoyed. Also consider checking out one of our other videos.